We're just giving folks about another 30 seconds to continue to join us, and then we will start the session. Thank you all for attending our webinar here today. Well, in the interest of time, why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you again for joining our session today. I'm Tom Leahy. I head up Sales and Business Development with SureShield. We are a strategic partner of LP3 Lights. And with me today is Butch Zackrell, David Wyatt, and Trevor Hayes from LP3, who will be conducting a good portion of this session, really to talk primarily around CMMC, what's happening, and really it's not as difficult or to get ready as you may think it is. So with that, Butch, why don't we go to the agenda briefly for today? So we're going to touch first of all on a little bit about CMMC and the CUI overview. Really that, as Butch and team will point out, you are closer than you think. What are the controls that you need to be thinking about? How do you find out where your gaps are? And then how do I apply these to meeting my CMMC compliance, closing gaps, and helping do that, and tools that can help you with that as well. We will take a brief poll about midway through the process around preparation for CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. And then at the end, we will go ahead and, of course, address any questions you may have. Please direct those questions to the Q&A portion of Zoom. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Butch and David to get the session started. And again, thank you all for attending today.
Thank you very much. My name is Butch Zackrell. I'm the Vice President of Cyber and Intelligence Analytics here at LP3. And as we help our clients with their NIST 800-171 compliance and start them down the road to the CMMC compliance, the very first question that they ask us is, what is CUI, and do I actually have CUI on my systems that are within the boundary for CMMC and NIST compliance? So as you can see here, CUI is a very broad brush as defined by the Department of Defense. So this could be anything from any type of personally identifiable information, all the way down to the response and tracking of your response to a solicitation or bid. So these are the contracts, the purchase orders, the information you send via email about the pursuit, et cetera, et cetera. But I also tell them it really doesn't matter the definition of CUI, and it really doesn't matter if you have CUI on your system or not. When that solicitation comes out, that contracting officer is going to put onto that solicitation the CMMC level required for the response. So whether you have CUI, regardless of the definition of CUI, what's going to matter is on the solicitation, the CMMC level that you need to be compliant with in order to respond to that bid, or your prime contractor is going to say, regardless of CUI or not, in order to remain in our ecosystem as a subcontractor, we want to have a minimum of X CMMC level. So what are those levels? So CMMC consists of 16 domains and 110 individual controls and policies. Now, they directly align with the NIST 800-171 110 controls. So if you are already NIST compliant, then you are already well on your way to CMMC compliance. And in order to be NIST compliant, quite frankly, all you need is a system security plan, an SSP, a plan of action and milestone, POAM, the POAM denoting all of the unimplemented controls and policies, and then denote that in the DoD's Suppliers Performance Risk System. You do not have to have any or all of the 110 controls implemented. You just need to have your SSP, your POAM, and denote that in the Suppliers Performance Risk System. NIST 800-171 is the statute today, and as of March 2023, the contracting officers are now required to check SPRs to ensure you're NIST compliant before contract award. That's very important because it's relatively new.
And that's new information to some extent, right, Butch? I mean, before it was a requirement to have it in there. Now they're putting more scrutiny about even making sure that it's in there.
That is correct. It was a requirement to be NIST 800-171 since 2017.
Yeah.
However, nobody was checking, right? So a lot of people just either checked the box when they weren't compliant, or if they were compliant, never denoted it into the Supplier's Performance Risk System. That is only about 1.5 years old, right? That they actually now have to put their SPRs information in. And again, it's not a heavy lift, right? It's very easy to create a SPRs account. You go in, you put in the name of your SSP. Now, what you will have to do is out of those 110 controls, you need to put in your SPRs score. Some of those controls are weighted -1, some are -3, some are -5. You take the unimplemented controls, add up the negative numbers, subtract that from 110, you have your SPRs score. And again, in a little bit, we're going to show you how close to compliance you are and how easy it is to be able to get the NIST compliance and get you well on your way to CMMC. But I will not steal David's thunder. So there are basically 3 levels of CMMC compliance. Level 1 is really only 17 of those 110 controls. Now, those 17 are the ones that are weighted the highest at 5, but basically there's only 17 of them. Okay, so that's level 1 compliant. Now, level 2 compliance is all 110 controls implemented. However, it's self-assessed, which means they're implemented because we went through the process, showed you that, yes, they're implemented within 1 or 2 sentences how they were implemented, and we can show a body of evidence or artifact that they are implemented. Now, the next level is what you hear a lot about. That is level 2, 110 controls implemented with that third-party audit. Now, you're going to hear a lot of information out there about, oh my gosh, this is tough, right? This is an audit. They're going to come in. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of money. However, no one in the government even knows what contracts are going to be level 1, level 2 self-assessed, or for that matter, level 2 third party. Now, what we are recommending to our clients is, yes, be NIST compliant, number 1, get that done. The second is take your plan of action and milestone, which is your unimplemented controls, Start using that as your worksheet. Take those 17 controls, start knocking them out. Get to level 1 compliance. Then start knocking out controls until you're level 2 self-assessed. Until the government is putting a gun to your head, there's really no reason from a compliance standpoint to go through the expense and the level of effort for that third-party audit. That third-party audit is going to take time. They are saying it could take up to anywhere between $25,000, $35,000, $40,000. I'll get to that in just a second because I don't know how they can come up with that number. But until the government is coming out and saying, hey, this solicitation is level 2, third party, there's no reason to be able to put out that expenditure until the government actually tells you to. Now, the level 3 is 110 controls plus a subset of the NIST 800-172, and the government will actually audit you. That's going to be extremely rare. Extremely rare. So I really would kind of take that off of the radar until they decide to cross that bridge. So CMMC timeframes. 2003, you know, we're telling our clients achieve level 1, get those 17 controls done. Shouldn't be that hard. And then work towards level 2 self-assessed. Now, once you're level 2 self-assessed, you can put that on your website. You can put that on solicitations you're answering today. Now, in 2024, there's going to be the implementation of CMMC version 2. I know it's been coming, and it is coming, okay? But it is moving at the speed of government. So right now, it is in the finalization of the rules committee. Now, this is where any type of government statute, before it's released, must go through this final phase, this final process, before they roll it out to the government contracting community. And that's where it's at today.
And Butch, there's, I mean, I guess you can't say 100% certainty, but 99% certainty that the structural framework that will be filed for CMMC compliance is going to be the NIST 800-171.
That is correct, because that's where the final decisions, or excuse me, the final process is at, right?
So
Yeah.
Needless to say, as an organization, you should have that in place. Like you're saying, if you don't get it started.
Well, you should have NIST 800-171 in place today.
Yep.
And since that's the baseline for CMMC, you should have at least X done already, right? You should have that head start with that system security plan and POAM. If you do not, we'll get into that in just a second. But that should already give you that, you know, little bit of a head start, if anything, for your CMMC compliance. Now, there's other agencies such as DHS is looking to roll out CMMC once it gets through this process. And actually, the Canadian government has actually adopted CMMC as well. So this is coming, right? But again, you are much closer than you may believe for compliance. So the third party assessment, and this is what I was talking about. If you look at it, you know, it looks very intense. But considering, and again, I'm not going to steal too much of David's thunder here, that when you are using any application as a service, now this could be anything from Google to Microsoft to QuickBooks to Salesforce, any of those types of service, they already have a listing of the controls that are already compliant. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, they did not. They were still going through their audits and their compliance process. So without stealing too much of David's thunder, you are much closer to compliance than you think. And when you look at a third-party assessment, and that third-party assessment will go to, let's say, Microsoft, and say, Microsoft, you say this control is compliant. We don't believe it is. For some reason, I don't think a third-party assessor is going to go up against Microsoft, whether they are compliant or not, considering Microsoft has already been through that third-party audit. So if you have X percentages of your controls compliant by Microsoft or QuickBooks or Unanet or Salesforce, that auditor is not going to be spending those hours auditing that control. So this is where my discrepancy comes with their 30,000, 35,000, 2-week, 3-week process. So this is, again, just giving a little overview of the third-party assessment. So I'm going to turn it over to David now, that is actually going to discuss with you as a service applications, using an example of one of the service providers, the controls covered. How do they apply? What are the gaps? And then again, how you address the unimplemented controls with a very straightforward, easy to use, let's put it this way, this Marine could use it almost out of the box, application tool set. David, you want to take it from here, sir?
And
yes, absolutely.
And David, just before we do that, we're going to take a very short poll for the participants. As Butch, as you mentioned, the requirement today is obviously submitting a score and then accompanying that with a system security plan and a plan of action and milestone report and submitting that to SPURS. So we're under the assumption that a lot of the folks here have done that, but if you have not, it's something that you will need to get in place really ASAP. And so we're just asking a brief question about whether you've done that as an organization. And if not, we can talk, David will talk to you about ways in which LP3 can help you with that. We'll just give the folks another couple of minutes or about another 30 seconds to respond. And interesting, it's almost like a third, a third, a third. 1/3 of the participants are saying that they have done it. Well, now over 50% are saying no, and then there's a couple that are not sure whether they've done it. So to Butch's point, it's not as just going to be submitting that score, but having the backup documentation with the plan of action and milestone and system security plan.
Yes.
That will assist you today with current contracts, and I'm assuming with current solicitations are going to have those requirements in them today as well.
Yeah, we've actually seen solicitations that ask for the SSP. Again, not many, but they do ask for it. We have seen, which our prime contractors have actually asked us for, is a screenshot of the supplier's performance risk system entry. Again, to quantify that, yes, we are compliant. And even those with an SSP and POAM, David, I'm going to have you just talk a little bit about, when you get to that point, how you can bring that into the tool set to be able to better track the SSP, track the POAM, but more importantly, be able to start collecting that body of evidence and artifacts into a single repository. So, David, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Butch. Appreciate it. My name is David Wyatt. I am the CTO for LP3, and I run the compliance department And this is definitely a fun webinar to have, especially if you're trying to gather information and understand what's happening out there, especially since CMMC is still rolling out some changes to their processes and their policies on how they're going to adapt, to the certification process and different controls for different type of contract within the defense industrial base. So first off, the cybersecurity model, it hasn't formalized guidance for cloud service providers at this point. But what has happened is most of the major cloud service providers have seen what's coming out and have already began to implement, if not fully implement, the CMMC version 2 compliance within their ecosystems. For an example, Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services have been leading the forefront in becoming CMMC version 2 compliant and passing it off to their clients before even the finalization has come out about how that's going to roll out. So working in like the Microsoft space, for an example, Microsoft has revamped and pretty much completely overhauled its security center through Azure to help you understand what different compliance requirements are out there, and to bring out frameworks and to bring out different pieces on how you can prove that you're compliant with NIST or with CMMC being inside the Microsoft environment. They also include some of their popular Microsoft products such as Azure Policies, Azure Blueprints, Azure Key Bolts, Azure Sentinel, and Microsoft Azure as a whole, which has recently just been renamed as Microsoft Entra. All of these services now are sitting on the back end of 110 controls implemented in their environment. They pass on about 60% of that reciprocity to you. And these are some of the ways that, this is the primary way that our cloud providers are going ahead and taking advantage of becoming CMMC compliant even before everything's rolled out.
So David, if I just heard you correctly, if you're using something like Azure Intra, and by the way, I learned something new today. If you're using Azure Intra, or lack of term, O365, you could be 40 to 60% CMMC compliant right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And again, I want to keep going back to the theme. You are much closer to compliance than you may think. Now think, if you're 40 to 60% there, what is the level of effort to get the rest of the 40%? Thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Butch. So basically, because using platforms like Microsoft 365, especially in their enterprise environment, yes, you are between 40, 60, sometimes 65% closer to becoming CMMC compliant on the level 2 side than you think. But additionally, it still gets better, is that for the controls that are not fully implemented, being in the Microsoft ecosystem allows you to reduce the lift on becoming compliant in those remaining controls by about another 40 to 60%, considering they already have the framework set up for you. You just have to know when to turn it on and how it's associated with other Microsoft products. You'll go through a rollout process internally that makes business sense and operational sense for you guys. But the lift is significantly reduced because you're leveraging all of the compliance for all the different frameworks that Microsoft already adheres to.
And David, you can just simply take this compliance matrix and very simply migrate that or import that into your existing SSP.
Absolutely. And Microsoft does a great job at providing compliance documentation for NIST, for pretty much all NIST frameworks, as well as for CMMC. For example, they'll state the templates that they use across your Microsoft 365 ecosystems are updated as soon as CMMC comes out, which is not the case for most other cloud providers. So they'll be within, I believe, 14 days of CMMC version 2 rolling out. Microsoft had already updated their templates and replaced that as the standard CMMC template for the rest of their ecosystem. From that perspective, you're able to apply the CMMC standards to all of your connected Microsoft services. You're able to generate a report, which then becomes a body of evidence, and it also becomes a supporting documentation for your POAM that identifies the gaps, it identifies what you need to do, how long it takes to implement it, and the other products that are, the other Microsoft products that are affected by each of these controls, as well as a recommendation on how Microsoft would do it in your current environment. The other thing too is Amazon is also picked up on this, and Amazon has followed Microsoft leads in bringing out compliance portal like websites that list all of the different compliance models that AWS uses, as well as breaking it down into your environment. So their services, such as their identity and access management, their security hub, their key management service, AWS Config and CloudTrails, for example, also are integrated to fall in line and to help pass on the AWS CMMC compliance down to you, therefore reducing the lift for the controls that are remaining inside those environments. Some other cloud providers that are commonly used for business applications are providers such as Atlassian, and like if you use Jira, if you use GitHub, if you use Bitbucket, some people also use Bamboo HR to do a lot of their cloud-based HR management. While these companies aren't fully CMMC compliant, what they do is they incorporate the CMMC compliance that are relative to their service platform, and they make it available for you to configure. For example, they enable you to use your Microsoft credentials to seamlessly log into the Atlassian products or to Bamboo HR. And what that'll do is allow you to use your identity access management or Azure Intra to pass on those credentials, allow you to still use your MFA, allow you to enforce MFA, password requirements, and password links, history, all of that good stuff. So most of our common cloud providers have seen this coming and have already prepared. And what we like to do at LP3 is just let you know that you absolutely are much closer than you think. And this isn't a level of effort that starts from the ground up, comparing one-to-one controls with your NIST, your CMMC versus each of the different platforms you use, whether they're hybrid, on-prem, that most of the services that you will use to do business have already moved in that space. They've taken advantage of it and they've spearheaded the trail for CMMC. And then they take everything else and they pass that reciprocity to their services that you guys subscribe to. So the next point we'll talk about is how do I apply these to my CMMC compliance? Well, I kind of touched on that when I brought down some of those Microsoft services. So basically, if we're looking at Microsoft 365 in their Microsoft Security Center, you're able to export, you're able to take the CMMC version 2 framework, compare it to all of the services you use. And that'll be whether you're using the Office suite, whether you're using Microsoft Intune, Defender, if you're using OneDrive, if you're using blob storage, if you're using Azure virtual machine instances, you'll be able to take that entire ecosystem and start bringing out compliance reports. And at that point, you'll be able to start seeing the gaps you might have, but also the progress you already made just by being inside those environments, whether you've been, securing them deliberately or not. It'll pull out all that reciprocity. Now, at this point, when you have all the bodies of evidence and you're looking at how it compares to CMMC, what's naturally going to happen when you compare this to the 110 CMMC version 2 controls is you're going to start looking at gaps. It's going to start bringing up the gaps. It's going to start giving you some recommendations on maybe in that Microsoft particular product that you're looking at, recommendations and the Microsoft documentation on, hey, this is what's not implemented. This is what is implemented. Here's our Microsoft documentation on how you would roll this out. Here's some guidance on planning rollouts before you do changes in the ecosystem, such as best practices for operational, for developing an operational plan before you start just turning things on and off, or start uploading policies that take place across your Microsoft infrastructure. So it'll give you all of that basic information. And at that point, it's up to the user to be able to compile this and start generating this and creating their SSPs and their POEMs. So now that you're at the point where you have the gaps come out, what do we do next?
So David, if I could, I would like to get Tom's thoughts and have him explain. You talked about the SSP, we talked about the POEM, we talk about bringing the controls in and then aligning those controls from NIST controls to CMMC controls. And I spoke of earlier of that SPURS score, the -1, the -3, the -5. Tom, can you talk a little bit about how your solution helps make all of this happen?
Yes, and I think that's where David may have been heading as well, that as you've gathered this, not any one single tool is going to have all, well, they will provide you basically, I think, the evidence that you have those controls implemented, and you're going to have a repository to actually collect all those artifacts, collect the answers to those particular control questions, and then generate out of that your system security plan and your plan of action and milestone report, particularly if you're not meeting every single one of those requirements. And it's most likely not everybody is 110% compliant, right? Or meet all 110 scores. So how we work is in collaborating with partners like LP3 and working with other, customers directly, is we provide software solutions that allow you to gather all that information, to have all the communication, to have all the gathering of the artifacts and evidence that will need to be there. When what do we call the CMMC audit process or review process begins, these are things they're going to want to see. Just answering something yes without having supporting evidence behind it will not, bear well for an organization, and they're going to ask for that kind of information. So how we complement this is providing tools that can help provide a full comprehensive gathering of all that information, and then doing, for purposes of right now, the auto computation of that, what they call the NIST 800-171 assessment score, the ability for you to actually generate the system security plan and POEM. And again, understanding that this is a continuous tool, meaning when you've identified gaps, you're going to want to go in and take actions to close those. And then you can see through solutions like ours that LP3 uses in conjunction with their services, how you are closing those gaps and how your performance is improving as you move along.
Yeah, that's great, Tom. Here at LP3, we've been using SureShield for a while now. And basically, when we're going through clients' environments and we're analyzing, what settings they have set up, if you're in Microsoft 365, when we're downloading the Microsoft Security Center reports, we have a bunch of data now that is saying that you have all of these things done. Here's the list of things that need to be completed to fully satisfy these controls. If I put my systems engineering hat back on, a lot of times what ends up happening is you're going to have a bunch of controls that need to be implemented that are going to go across different departments. I have a lot of technical controls that I might be personally trying to implement with my team, but then there's also policies that are put in place that maybe somebody in your operations department and your senior leadership are going to have to review and start adopting specific, policies for that. And Tom, is there a way that, what is SureShield's way of addressing the technical controls and maybe the policy controls and how they interact with that to help keep our wires straight and to help keep the lanes focused on the compliance port.
Excellent. So as part of the package of what we provide in there are templated policies, meaning we've already developed policies that are mapped to the various controls. Now, there's ways in which an organization can modify or customize those if they already have them in place. But where the benefit is we've mapped the controls to the relevant policies. So as you begin to actually do your own assessments, you can not only look at it at a control level, but you can start looking at a policy level, meaning you can look at policies and see around those policies what have all the controls in place and what might not have all the controls in place, and then easily direct you to what you need to do to make that policy fully compliant. Did that answer your question, David?
Yes, absolutely. And I find this as somebody who is actually implementing these controls, I find this to be one of the most beneficial processes and tools integrated into SureShield, so that I know these are the controls that I'm going to have to do configurations with. And then maybe these are the controls that are more policy related outside of my scope of work, but I can pass that on to my leadership or pass it on to my operations team so they can say, hey, out of all the 110 controls, we can segment these X amount of controls to our IT teams, these X amount of controls to our operation teams, these X amount of controls maybe to our senior leadership when it comes to policies regarding employment status, background checks, all of those things that are part of the scope of CMMC version 2.
Yeah, and David, this is Butch again. And let's keep in mind, these are only the controls that are not covered under your as a service provider, such as Microsoft. Secondly, the tool in of itself comes with those draft policies that you simply edit so it best fits your company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like LP3, we are a virtual company. So some of those policies, as when somebody comes into your office, do they have to sign in? Well, that's not applicable because we don't have offices. So when you're thinking of these unimplemented controls and these policies, again, you're much closer than you think. This is not going to be a heavy lift for you to get to where you need to be. David?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the great benefits about using a tool like this is that you, no kidding, are going to come out with an honest look at where your infrastructure is, what it's connected to, and you're also going to know what the actual requirement is. Instead of trying to look at the 110 controls, look at the question and say, I still don't really understand what the full scope of this is, or maybe I'm not in the compliance space. I don't have an IT team that has been in the cybersecurity area. Well, what this does is this also closes that gap to break down each requirement, break down each scope, and also give you recommendations, right? When it builds out your POAM for unimplemented controls, it also gives you the recommendations moving forward on how you might look at this. What are the parameters in which I can look at to become compliant with these controls? One of the other things too that this allows us to do now is this allows us to save the time that we would spend trying to implement this ourselves, trying to Google the control, trying to figure out how it works within our own unique infrastructure. What this does is this basically streamlines and says, okay, if you're using this environment and you have these things set up, this is what that control will look like. Here's the gap analysis. We're going to put it in that POAM that's required anyway. And now you have an execution list to say, out of all of this, I can start my assignments. I can start delegating this to the appropriate teams, and I can keep track of who's doing what and what controls within each department. Therefore, I can start projecting the level of effort and also maybe even the timelines it's going to take for your individual on a unique basis to get to that endpoint of becoming CMMC compliant with those controls. Tom, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, just to the point of, another area of what I would call efficiencies is from a technology standpoint, as Butch pointed out in the beginning, and you've, re-emphasized, CMMC is completely based on the NIST 800-171 framework, even though they are changing things like, areas of level. So people could, when CMMC comes out, there's going to be different levels of either a level 1 or a level 2, which NIST doesn't have right now, right? But the controls in essence are the same. So what we've designed is what I would call mapping and crosswalking to all that. So when you begin this process, again, being closer than you think, it's not like you have to think of this in two different realms. If you go through the process of closing your gaps and understanding where you are from a NIST standpoint, and knowing that you have tools that are already telling you that oftentimes that you're pretty much there, you're not going to have to worry about having to reinvent the wheel when it comes to presenting this in CMMC. You're just basically going to map that over and have all the supporting evidence, all the information you need to show how you stand from a quote unquote CMMC perspective as well.
Thank you, Tom.
And I would just say, and it's going to help you meet your current requirements right now, which is if there's any new solicitations coming out, there's some folks that have indicated on this call that they haven't even done a POEM or a system security plan. We can help automate that for you to some extent, and you're going to need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom.
Okay. There we go. So CMMC audit ready. Okay. So let's kind of talk about, what we have learned. First of all, you are much closer than you think for CMMC. For those who are not NIST compliant, again, not a big level of effort for NIST compliance. A system security plan, a plan of action and milestone, denoted in the DoD Suppliers Performance Risk System. At that point in time, regardless of how many controls are unimplemented, you are NIST 800-171 compliant. Okay, so what is kind of the easiest way to get there, right? So LP3 does offer a government contractor starter package. So what this starter package provides, it provides the Short Shield Compliance Shield module. So that literally automatically creates your SSP from your input. It will create your plan of action and milestone. It will denote all of the NIST controls. It automatically compiles your SPURS score. It automatically maps those controls from NIST to CMMC Level 1 and CMMC Level 2. It also provides you a place to be able to store your artifacts in your body of evidence, okay? And we also provide services to show you how to use this tool, so we just don't sell you a software package and say, bon appetit, good luck with it, okay? So all of this comes into a single package that you can actually do yourself for the cost of $3,795. So for that amount of monies, you have your SSP, you have your POEM, you have your NIST, you have your CMMC roadmap, you have your SPURS score. It also provides, which is part of the controls, your continuous monitoring. So a year from now, you use the exact same package to be able to do your continuous monitoring. It will let you know that you're CMMC Level 1 compliant, or what controls you need to implement in order to be Level 1. And the same thing for Level 2. Now, and David, we've actually worked with some of our customers because it's not just NIST compliance. And it's not just CMMC compliance. You can actually use this for your marketing material. Hey, we take cyber so seriously, we are NIST 800-171 compliant. We are CMMC Level 1 or Level 2 self-assessed compliant. It's a differentiator. Use it. You've put forth the effort, you might as well use it. And David, if I'm not mistaken, your team has worked with some of our customers to go over their cyber insurance questionnaires and going through those questionnaires and saying, yes, we are doing this and we have the body of evidence in our SSP to prove it. You want to talk just really, really briefly about how we help and how this can actually lower your cyber security insurance? David?
Absolutely. So on that note right there, working with SureShield, typically with your cyber insurance companies, what you can do is you can actually engage them and say, hey, look, I'm compliant with NIST 800-171. Or you can ask them for a questionnaire, because typically your cybersecurity companies, they'll ask you a question of, hey, look, is there any cybersecurity frameworks that you guys implement that might affect your insurance rate, or that we might want to consider when we're giving you insurance quotes and insurance rates? And so far, I haven't found one cybersecurity insurance company that has not provided a discounted rate to individuals who are NIST 800-171 compliant with the implementation of those controls, or CMMC version 2 compliant. What typically goes down in that process is they'll send you a questionnaire and they'll say, hey, look, if you want a discount, here are a list of controls, or here are a list of items you have to address and prove to us that you have implemented, so that we can reassess your quote and give you that cybersecurity discount because of your cybersecurity posture.
Thank you. And also, David, you know, we come up with a lot of companies who have a very big commercial presence, but not so big of a DoD presence. And either they have something like SOC 2 or ISO 27001/2 already implemented, or they're looking to implement SOC 2 or ISO. What is the cross-pollination between CMMC and NIST and something like a SOC 2?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, for the cross-pollination, if you're CMMC Level 2 compliant, so you have all of the 110 controls completed within CMMC, you have about a 65% reciprocity moving into SOC 2. You have about a 70% reciprocity moving into the ISO spheres. And typically, the difference between what is covered and what isn't has to do with the reporting document requirements for each other compliance frameworks, and or a more of a business and operational aspect that they address in addition to technical controls. So you could actually use SureShield to go through CMMC compliance. And if you're doing it in preparation because you're moving into the defense industrial base market, you can actually take this and leverage that to, let's say, go through your ISO compliance or go through your SOC 2 compliance at a much simpler level of effort. And it's all done and managed within SureShield. You do not have to purchase another tool. You do not have to go get another subscription somewhere else. It can all be handled in-house, where the cross mapping is already done. it already cross maps all your body of evidence that's in your SureShield repository. It'll link the controls, it'll link the policies created as well. Therefore, now you're using SureShield to manage your complete compliance ecosystem across whatever your business needs are.
And also think, if you're already SOC 2 compliant, think of the reciprocity going then toward NIST or CMMC.
Absolutely.
Again, you are much closer than you may think to this compliance. And again, you know, just to conclude here, because we have about 8 minutes left and we want to take your questions. There's a lot of people out there that are going to try to scare you into compliance. They're going to tell you you need all of these services. They're going to tell you that, oh my God, you've got to prepare and you've got to start your audit today. You don't, okay? Do we provide services? Yes. Some of our customers just don't want to do it at all. So they give all of their NIST compliance, their CMMC compliance, and their remediation, and they just outsource it, and we're happy to do it. Do you need to do it? Start building that. Start building the data points for that decision, right? Create your SSP. Create your POAM. See what controls you can implement yourself. See what policies you can change and do it yourself. If you need assistance on a handful of controls, then either go to an RPO like ourselves and said, hey, we just need these. We have seen and talked to customers where the vendor, not a partner, because at this time they're acting like a vendor, are saying, hey, we will make you NIST compliant, or we will make you CMMC compliant, but they never asked for the POAM. Well, how do they know the level of effort? Right? They're just guessing and charging you money. Again, you are much closer than you think. Find out how close you are and then start making informed decisions about control and policy implementation, or even if you need any help. Remember, level 1, 17 controls. Level 2, self-assessed. And again, if they're telling you, oh my God, you better start your audit now. Well, when the government puts a gun to your head and says, yes, you must have an audit, start going down that road. But that audit shouldn't be, again, a heavy lift, because you're using a tool like SureShield that has the body of evidence, that has the artifacts. And how are they going to argue or even audit if Microsoft is compliant or not? So having said that, I would be more than happy to take your questions and you can address them to David, myself, whomever's the best to answer.
Yeah, if you can please go to the Q&A section and just another note, as we pointed out, if we do have a poll open, if you are interested in a no obligation consultation with LP3 on how to get you ready, please go ahead and answer that. And then folks from LP3 will be following up with you. I see there's several that have indicated they would like to do that. A couple of
by the way, and Tom, if I may, that no obligation consultation, if you just want to say, okay, here's where I'm at, what do you guys think, right? We're going to have smart people on the call, our subject matter experts, to be able to discuss that with you. We can discuss your unique business, where you're at in the ecosystem within the federal government and DoD. So if you don't want to ask your questions here, please feel free to reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you, and we will address those questions and concerns with no BS assessments and no BS answers.
Great. And I do see a question that I'll have David answer around, Craig's asking what level of 365 license is needed to get access to the Microsoft security policies?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So moving into the security center policies, from the Microsoft perspective, you're going to need to have at least a Microsoft 365 E3 license assigned to your account, and that assigned user will be able to access the Microsoft Security Center, as well as the correlation of which frameworks you would like to measure yourself on.
So David, and that could be just one single license, not like everybody?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And there was a question that I just answered about the tool requiring templates and procedures required for implementation of controls. Yes, that is part of what is packaged with the solution through LP3.
Yeah, and a lot of these, especially when it comes to policies, because people really freak out on policies, right? You'll have these templates, and then again, you'll just edit those so it best fits your company. You don't have to start with a blank slate and start creating policies.
Right.
Yeah, and when it comes to the policies piece, working with my clients, one of the largest chunks of time you'll spend is creating policies, getting policies approved, trying to map them to your requirements. What's really good at a bare minimum is if you already have some mature, established cybersecurity policies, it is very, very helpful to be able to say, look, this tool is providing me all of the detailed policies per each of the CMMC requirements. I can use this to compare them to what I have, to the existing policies that I have. And if it makes sense, I can take some of the gaps maybe in my existing policies, and I can bring over the processes or maybe the layouts that I don't have that I find in these templates, and I can update my new policies. On the flip side, if you have very loose, or maybe you don't have a lot of policies in place regarding your cyber guidelines, then you have a great place to start without having to go online and download a whole bunch of trials and sign up for a bunch of different packages just to get a template that doesn't seem to fully align with what you're looking for. So it's all in one box, and it gives you that peace of mind of, okay, I at least know where I'm going, and I can have peace of mind that what I have here is directly related to my objectives.
Two other questions before we close. One of the questions is around in using kind of the tool as part of implementation, or is a consultation required as part of this?
Well, we actually provide as part of the package, because what we don't want to do is, just give you the tool and then not really show you how to use it. So there is going to be, as part of the price that I gave you, there is going to be consultation on how to use the tool, how to go in, how to bring in this information, how to create that POAM, how to create that SSP. So we're going to train you on how to use the tool. And then during that session, also address any questions or concerns that you have. A lot of these tools, they just sell them to you, and then, you have to keep calling support, right? In order to learn how to use it. So consultation is part of the package. If you need additional services, then you can come to us and we can do something unique that makes sense for you.
Great. And I know we're running up against it on time. There's a couple questions about pricing that I think I'll probably, Butch, just have you follow up with these individuals, if that's okay, to clarify, the annual base pricing each year.
Sure.
And then the price for the initial package.
Yeah, Tom, if you could just email me those questions and to whom has asked them, I will get back with them with detailed information. No secret in the price, no guy behind the curtain, right? Full transparency, and we'll address any questions or concerns on that.
Great. So I know we're running up against the hour. We really appreciate everyone's time. Again, the poll is still open, and we will make sure that folks who have answered yes, or folks that have some questions that are unanswered here, you will get a follow-up, either email and or scheduling time to speak with you with the folks from LP3. And again, want to thank everybody for participating today. Hopefully, we've given you maybe a little bit more sigh of relief that this is not going to be quite as difficult as may seem, and we hopefully will have an opportunity to help you with that. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the session and appreciate everyone's time here today. Butch, David, Trevor, thank you much for a nice presentation.
And thank everyone for attending. Tom, thank you for putting it all together. It's probably more of a lift than CMMC is.
Thanks, Butch. All right, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.